In 331 BC, on a stretch of flat ground near a village called Gaugamela, Darius III sent thousands of men ahead of his army with shovels. They filled in ditches, cleared brush, and smoothed the earth into something close to a parade ground. His scythe chariots needed flat terrain to be effective, and his numbers, somewhere north of double Alexander's, needed open space to encircle. Darius chose the battlefield, set the date, and waited for his enemy to walk onto it. Alexander arrived, looked at the ground, and did nothing. For days, his general Parmenion, watching the Persian army stand in formation under a full moon, urged a night attack. The math was obvious. Fewer men, more confusion in darkness. An enemy too disciplined to beat in open daylight any other way. Alexander refused. He told his officers he would not steal a victory. The Persians stood through the night, sleepless and rigid, waiting for an assault that never came. At dawn, when the armies finally closed, Alexander didn't march into the center of the line, where Darius sat surrounded by his best troops on the ground built specifically to receive him. He marched sideways. He pulled his cavalry obliquely to the right, dragging the Persian wings with him, stretching their line until a gap opened in the center, the same center built for him to die in. He turned and drove straight through that gap, straight at Darius. The king broke and ran. An empire that had stood for 2 centuries ended that morning, on ground its own engineers had built, lost in the exact place its architect never expected to lose it. The reason for both refusals matters more than the trivia, because it explains why certain people and certain nations spend decades accumulating strength, while others exhaust themselves fighting battles that never needed to happen. That answer comes at the end. For now, hold on to this. Never meet the enemy where they are ready for you. Most people treat conflict as something decided in the clash. 2 forces meet. One proves stronger. The stronger wins. That's the version taught in stories with neat endings. The real architecture of conflict is decided before the clash, in the choice of when and where it happens. By the time 2 forces meet, the outcome is mostly already settled by who chose the terrain, who chose the hour, who chose the condition of the other side's body and mind in that moment. The clash is just the bill arriving for decisions made earlier. This is why being drawn into a battle is, in most cases, already a loss, regardless of who walks away standing. If your opponent selected the ground, the timing, and the terms, you've agreed to fight inside their model of reality. Even a win, there is a win on their terms, at their depletion rate, repeatable by them whenever they choose to set the same trap again. You haven't demonstrated strength. You've demonstrated availability. Reacting means something happened that you didn't originate and didn't see coming, clearly enough to prevent or reframe. It's proof of a blind spot. The faster and more impressively you react, the more skilled you look, and the less it actually changes. Because the frame was never yours. Initiating is the opposite condition. It means you mapped the terrain before anyone stood on it, decided the hour before anyone proposed one, and arrived already knowing the shape of what would happen. Alexander didn't initiate at Gaugamela by attacking first. He initiated by refusing every invitation to fight on someone else's clock. Then manufacturing his own moment inside a battle everyone assumed was already fully defined. Move the same law forward 19 centuries and it shows up again, dressed differently. At Austerlitz, Napoleon held the high ground first, the Pratzen Heights, the position every officer on either side knew was the key terrain of the field. Then he abandoned it. He pulled his men back, thinned his right flank deliberately, and let the position look weak enough that the Austro-Russian command, eager to cut off what looked like a beaten army, marched down off the heights to encircle it. The descent split their force across the high ground and the valley floor. Napoleon's reserves, hidden behind a ridge, climbed back into the gap their own greed had created and split the Allied army in 2, before lunch. Retreat had never been a retreat. It was bait shaped exactly like weakness, placed exactly where ambition couldn't resist it. Both men won their decisive battles through refusal first. Refusal of the obvious terrain, the obvious hour, the fight the enemy had already built a stage for. When they finally struck, they struck once, in a place of their own design, and the war ended in an afternoon instead of dragging on for years. This law governs rooms with no flags and no cavalry, just as completely. Somebody at work sends the email built to Provel, timed for late on a Friday, copying the right people. Worded sharply enough that any response looks defensive and any silence looks weak. The moment you reply inside that thread, on that day, in that tone, you've walked onto ground they built and lit. You might write something clever. You might even be right. It doesn't matter. You've agreed to argue inside their frame, at their chosen hour, in front of their chosen audience. That's the leveled plane at Gaugamela. Except the invitation arrived as a notification. A relative at the dinner table brings up the one subject that unsettles you, every year, at the exact moment everyone else is listening. The clerk who enjoys making you repeat yourself for the 4th time. The friend who only calls when they need something and frames every refusal as a character flaw in you. None of these are battles that need winning. They're battles that need refusing, because the terrain was never built for your benefit. And whatever version of you shows up, charming or furious or perfectly reasoned, still let someone else choose the day, the topic, and the room. A provocation is an invitation to a battlefield, someone else surveyed in advance. Declining is not the same as the soft, anxious version of conflict avoidance people usually mean by that phrase. It's the same maneuver as a king turning down a night attack he could have won small to keep a larger war on his own terms. None of this holds as a one-time act of willpower. Because willpower spent fresh every time a provocation lands is the most expensive resource a person has, and the easiest one for others to drain. The discipline has to become structural before it becomes personal. A standing rule decided once in a calm hour about which categories of invitation get answered and which get ignored by default, so that in the heated moment there is no decision left to make, only a rule to follow. Treat attention and goodwill like a treasury with a budget, not a tap that opens for whoever turns it. The person who has already decided, weeks ahead, that certain topics and certain people and certain hours of certain days are simply off the table, isn't reacting in the moment of provocation at all. They built the wall before the army arrived. Scale this up to the level of states and the picture sharpens rather than changes. A hostile actor with little to lose and an enormous appetite for instability doesn't need to defeat a stronger power in any single confrontation. It only needs to keep proposing small fights. A border incident here, an intrusion there, a proxy skirmish somewhere else, each cheap to start and expensive to ignore. A stronger power that answers every single proposal spends its treasury, its attention, its political capital, and its patience on 1,000 engagements that were never meant to be won outright, only meant to bleed it slowly. This is attrition, aimed specifically at powers too proud or too anxious to refuse a fight once it's offered. The discipline required here is brutal and unglamorous. Refuse almost all of it. Decline the skirmish. Let the provocations sit unanswered. Absorb the appearance of passivity, because the appearance of passivity is cheap and the reality of constant reactive engagement is not. Reserve the actual decisive response, when one becomes unavoidable, for a moment and a place chosen entirely on your own terms. Delivered rarely, delivered overwhelmingly, and never on the schedule the provocateur proposed. A single response of that kind ends more conflicts than 100 answered provocations ever will. For the same reason one strike through Darius's center ended an empire that 1,000 cautious skirmishes never could have touched. Return to that night outside Gaugamela, because because the refusal there wasn't caution, and it wasn't mercy. Night attack would have worked. It might have scattered the Persian camp and produced a story about a brilliant raid. It also would have let Darius slip away in the dark, regroup deeper in his empire, and drag the war into another year, another campaign, another season of bleeding men and gold into a conflict that refused to end. Alexander didn't refuse the night attack out of fairness. He refused it because a cheap win there would have purchased an expensive war later. He wanted the Persian army standing, exhausted, fully committed, in daylight, so that when he did strike, he could strike at the one moment their formation would actually break for good. He spent one uncomfortable night and a wounded sense of glory to avoid years of attrition. He bought the only victory that mattered by refusing the easy one already sitting in front of him. That's the promise underneath everything above, earned now rather than stated up front. The people and the powers who spend decades accumulating strength while everyone around them spends down to nothing are almost never smarter, richer, or more talented. They've simply refused more invitations. They let the small provocations pass unanswered. Let the bait sit untouched on ground built for someone else's ambition, and saved the one response that actually mattered for a place and an hour of their own choosing. Everyone else mistakes that patience for weakness right up until the morning the gap finally opens, and by then it's already too late to close it. Don't meet anyone on ground they prepared for you. Don't hand your patience to people who only feel powerful when they've used it up. Don't spend will on volatile things that were never going to settle anything anyway. Wait, refuse, and when the moment finally requires a blow, deliver it once, somewhere they never thought to defend.